If Matthew, Mark, and Luke are all inspired by the Holy Spirit, recording what actually happened, they should agree on basic facts. They don't. Not even close. These aren't minor differences in detail. These are fundamental contradictions that cannot be reconciled. Let me show you. The birth narratives, Matthew versus Luke. Matthew and Luke both tell the birth story, but they're telling completely different stories. The timeline problem. Matthew chapter 2, verse 1. Now, after Yeshua was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, Herod the Great died in 4 BC. So according to Matthew, Yeshua was born before 4 BC. Luke chapter 2, verses 1 to 2. And it came to pass in those days that a decree went out from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be registered. This census first took place when Quirinius was governing Syria. Historical records place Quirinius' census in 6 to 7 AD. That's 10 to 11 years after Herod died. Yeshua cannot be born both during Herod's reign, before 4 BC, and during Quirinius' census, in 6 to 7 AD. One of them is wrong, or both are. The geography problem. Matthew's version, Joseph and Mary apparently live in Bethlehem. They have a house there. Matthew 2:11 says the Magi visited them in a house. Yeshua is born in Bethlehem. The family flees to Egypt. After Herod dies, they want to return to Judea but fear Archelaus, Herod's son. So they relocate to Nazareth in Galilee. This is presented as a new place they're moving to. Matthew 2:23 says they came and dwelt in Nazareth, that it might be fulfilled. Luke's version, Luke 1:26 to 27 and Luke 2:4, say Joseph and Mary live in Nazareth of Galilee. That's their home. They travel to Bethlehem for the census. Yeshua is born in Bethlehem in a manger because there's no room in the inn. 8 days later, circumcision. 40 days after birth, they go to the temple in Jerusalem for Mary's purification and present Yeshua. Then Luke 2:39 says they return to their own town, Nazareth in Galilee. Luke 2:41 says they went to Jerusalem every year for Passover. These are completely incompatible. Matthew presents Nazareth as a new place of refuge they relocate to after Egypt. Luke presents Nazareth as their original home they return to after a brief census trip. Luke's account leaves no room for a flight to Egypt or years in exile. Luke explicitly states they returned to Nazareth and went to Jerusalem annually. You cannot harmonize these without adding information that isn't in either text. The events that don't overlap Matthew includes Magi following a star, gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh, Herod's massacre of infants in Bethlehem, flight to Egypt, years in Egypt. Luke includes census requiring travel, birth in a manger, angelic announcement to shepherds, shepherds visiting the newborn, presentation at the temple 40 days after birth, prophecies of Simeon and Anna at the temple. Matthew knows nothing about shepherds, a census, or temple presentations. Luke knows nothing about Magi, a massacre, or Egypt. These are mutually exclusive sequences. Luke's family is publicly at the Jerusalem temple 40 days after birth, then returning home to Nazareth. Matthew's family is fleeing for their lives to Egypt. One is wrong, or both are. The death of Judas. Here's another irreconcilable contradiction. Matthew chapter 27, verses 3 to 8. Judas returns the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests. He throws the money into the temple. He goes and hangs himself. The chief priests take the money and buy the potter's field with it. It's called the field of blood because it was bought with blood money. Acts chapter 1, verses 18 to 19. Judas himself bought the field with the reward of his wickedness. He fell headlong, his body burst open, and all his intestines gushed out. It's called the field of blood because of how he died there, with his blood spilled. Who bought the field? The chief priests or Judas himself? How did he die? Hanging or falling and bursting open? Why is it called Field of Blood? Because it was bought with blood money, or because Judas's blood was spilled there? These are three separate contradictions in one story. You cannot harmonize them. The demon-possessed man, 1 or 2. Matthew chapter 8 verses 28 to 34, 2 demon-possessed men. Mark chapter 5 verses 1 to 20, 1 demon-possessed man. Luke chapter 8 verses 26 to 39, 1 demon-possessed man. Mark and Luke give extensive individual details about this one man. His name is Legion. He lived in the tombs. He broke chains. He cut himself with stones. After being healed, he begged to go with Yeshua, but was told to go home and tell what God had done for him. Matthew has 2 men, no names, no personal details. They completely disappear from the narrative after being healed. No commissioning scene. This isn't rounding or one gospel focuses on one guy. Matthew says there were 2. Mark and Luke say there was 1. The demons speak differently depending on how many men there are. In Matthew, the demons use plural. What have you to do with us? In Mark and Luke, the demons use singular. What have you to do with me? And Matthew completely omits the climax of the story, where the healed man becomes a witness. Either Matthew invented a second man, or Mark and Luke erased one. Geography problems in Mark didn't know Palestinian geography. Mark chapter 5, verse 1. Then they came to the other side of the sea, to the country of the Gerasenes. Problem: Gerasa is 30 miles from the Sea of Galilee. The pigs cannot run 30 miles to drown in the sea. Some ancient scribes recognized this was wrong and changed the text to Gadarenes or Gergesenes in later manuscripts. The manuscript variations prove ancient readers knew this was problematic. Mark chapter 7, verse 31. Again, departing from the region of Tyre and Sidon, he came to the Sea of Galilee through the midst of the region of Decapolis. This is like saying, he left San Francisco and went through Seattle to get to San Diego by way of Las Vegas. Sidon is north of Tyre. The Sea of Galilee is south of both. The Decapolis is southeast. The route makes no geographical sense. The author doesn't know the land. When was the temple cleansing? The Synoptics, Matthew 21, Mark 11, Luke 19. The temple cleansing happens at the end of Yeshua's ministry. It's part of the final week before crucifixion. It triggers the plot to kill him. John chapter 2, verses 13 to 16. The temple cleansing happens at the beginning of Yeshua's ministry, right after the wedding at Cana. This isn't a minor detail. This is a major public confrontation in the holiest site in Israel. It either happened at the beginning of his ministry or at the end. It cannot be both. The Last Supper. Was it Passover? The Synoptics say yes. Matthew 26:17, Mark 14:12, Luke 22:7-8. The disciples prepare the Passover. They eat the Passover meal together. Luke 22:15. Yeshua says, I have earnestly desired to eat this Passover with you before I suffer. According to the Synoptics, the Last Supper was the Passover meal. John says no. John 13:1. Now before the feast of the Passover. John 18:28. The Jewish leaders won't enter Pilate's headquarters, lest they should be defiled, but that they might eat the Passover. It's the morning of the trial, and they haven't eaten Passover yet. It's coming that evening. John 19:14. Now it was the preparation day of the Passover, and about the 6th hour. It's still preparation day. Passover hasn't started. Both cannot be true. Either the Last Supper was the Passover, or it was the night before Passover. We'll cover this in detail in the next episode. But the point here is, the Gospels contradict each other on when this happened. The resurrection accounts. If the resurrection is the most important event in history, you'd think the Gospels would agree on what happened. They don't. Who went to the tomb? Matthew 28:1. Mary Magdalene and the other Mary. Mark 16:1. Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome. Luke 24:10. Mary Magdalene, Joanna, Mary the mother of James, and the other women. 3 different groups. Was the tomb open? Matthew 28:1-2. No. They witnessed an angel roll the stone away. Mark 16:4. Yes. The stone was already rolled away when they arrived. Luke 24:2. Yes. The stone was already rolled away. Who did they see? Matthew 28:2-5. One angel sitting on the stone outside. Mark 16:5. One young man in white sitting inside on the right. Luke 24:4. 2 men in dazzling apparel standing inside. 1 angel outside. 1 man inside. 2 men inside. These are different accounts. Did they see Yeshua at the tomb? Matthew 28:9. Yes. Yeshua met them as they were leaving. Mark 16:9-11. Yes, but only in the longer ending, which wasn't in the original manuscripts. Yeshua appeared first to Mary Magdalene. Luke 24:13-35. No. Yeshua first appeared to 2 disciples on the road to Emmaus. What were they told to do? Matthew 28:7-10. Go tell the disciples to go to Galilee where they will see Yeshua. Mark 16:7. Go tell the disciples and Peter to go to Galilee. Luke 24:6-9. Remember what Yeshua told you in Galilee. They return and tell the 11 in Jerusalem. Wait. Matthew and Mark say go to Galilee. Luke says stay in Jerusalem. Did they tell anyone? Matthew 28:8. Yes. They ran with fear and great joy to tell the disciples. Mark 16:8. No. They said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid. This is where Mark's gospel ends in the earliest manuscripts. Luke 24:9. Yes. They told the 11 and all the rest. Mark explicitly says they told no one. Matthew and Luke say they did. Where did Yeshua appear to the disciples? Matthew 28:16-20. On a mountain in Galilee. Luke 24:33-49, in Jerusalem, and he explicitly tells them to stay in Jerusalem until they receive power from on high. Matthew, go to Galilee. Luke, stay in Jerusalem. These are mutually exclusive. The pattern, literary dependence. Here's what's really happening. Most scholars recognize that Mark was written first, around 65 to 70 AD. Matthew and Luke used Mark as a source. When Matthew and Luke tell the same story as Mark, they often use Mark's exact wording. When they deviate from Mark, they rarely agree with each other. Matthew and Luke correct Mark's grammar and awkward phrases. If these are independent eyewitness accounts, why do Matthew and Luke copy from Mark? Why not just report what they saw? And here's the smoking gun. Mark chapter 2, verse 26. Yeshua says David ate the showbread when Abiathar was high priest. But 1 Samuel 21:1-6 says it was when Ahimelech, Abiathar's father, was priest. Mark got the priest wrong. What's revealing? Matthew 12:3-4 copies this story but omits when Abiathar was high priest. Luke 6:3-4 also copies it but omits when Abiathar was high priest. Both Matthew and Luke recognized Mark's error and quietly removed it. If Matthew and Luke are independent, inspired, infallible accounts, why do they copy from Mark word for word in many places, correct Mark's mistakes, and improve Mark's grammar? The whole process looks entirely human. What this proves: the Synoptic Gospels are not independent eyewitness accounts. They are later compositions using earlier sources, edited and shaped for different audiences with different theological agendas. They contradict each other on basic facts, numbers, geography, timeline, events, teachings. You cannot trust all 3. At best, you can trust one. At worst, none of them are reliable. And we already know from previous episodes that Matthew fabricates prophecies and can't read Hebrew. So, if Matthew is unreliable, and Mark and Luke copy from him and add their own errors, what are we left with? John, the eyewitness, the one who was actually there, the one who doesn't need to copy from anyone else, the one whose gospel doesn't contradict itself. In the next episode, we're going to look at one specific contradiction in detail. When was Yeshua actually crucified? Because the synoptics get it wrong, and John gets it right.